Van Arnam.
Thanks so much.
Did I do that well? Thank you for that. Who graduated from Syracuse University with a degree in psychology and then took a job selling search marketing to internet businesses. It was then he first observed the porn industry's dominance of the internet and started working to protect minors from being exposed. This led him to eventually found what he called the Third Talk, designed to initiate pornography prevention conversations with young people. Come on, y'all put your hands together. These guys come to share their wisdom with us today.
So I'm going to take off where our last speaker left and talk about demand reduction. But I'm going to talk specifically about the child sex abuse material market and demand reduction of that and how it relates to trafficking. So the first thing on my agenda is to change everyone's language. Child pornography is an offensive term to victims of sex abuse, child victims of sex abuse. Pornography implies consent and implies participation and implies being part of the market and wanting to be part of the market. We need to be careful. We need to market the term child sex abuse material and change everything. Fortunately, in North Carolina, the North Carolina statute says sexual exploitation of a minor. Although embedded in the statute is language that says child pornography over and over and over again, the actual crime in North Carolina is sexual exploitation of a minor. So we don't have to do so much of it here in North Carolina. But that's one of my big bugaboos. Child pornography is an offensive term. CSAM, child sex abuse material, is a better term. Child sex abuse material is skyrocketing world over, and it is invading every aspect of life. People are looking at more and more. As they delve into pornography, they're looking for harder and harder stuff. Many of the suspects that I would interrogate and ask questions as we took them in would confess that they started at a very, very early age, which my co-partner, John, is going to talk about a little bit, the market of pornography for the youth. But they started at a very, very early age in this market. And it has proliferated because of the internet and because of the way the internet has grown over the years. So sadly, the majority of CSAM is created by people with legitimate access to children, parents, brothers, uncles. People that have access to those children are the ones that are creating it. Self-generated child sex abuse material has skyrocketed. When I first started this job years ago, we didn't see much self-generated material. In fact, in the 80s and the 90s, what we saw was stuff in magazines that you could only get through the mail, and the U.S. Postal Inspections was heavily involved in pushing investigations into the mail trafficking of child sex abuse material. But with the proliferation of the internet, it has taken off, with children involved in sexting each other and sending each other information. It has taken off, and it is huge. These images or videos result from multiple sources: a romantic interchange between two kids, a child being groomed and extorted to take explicit images of themselves, a screen capture of a live stream, and finally, some research that was done by ICMEC over in the European market some time ago. They pointed the finger at who creates the most child sex abuse material in the world. And the United States has the market on child sex abuse material. Not some Russian country, not Mexico, not Brazil, not Ukraine, which used to be the market when the magazines were prolific and there were certain magazines and certain pictures that were out there. Now it's United States, and it's mostly homegrown. And that's what we're going to talk about, why reducing the demand for child sex abuse material reducing those that are buying it helps reduce it. I remember so many cases in the career that I had I could talk about cases all day long. I remember an 8-year-old chatting with a 29-year-old in Cary, and this 8-year-old, first experience she'd ever had was sex online, and she's sending this 29-year-old man all kinds of intimate images. A 7-year-old, he gets a Christmas present. This Christmas present is a computer. He takes it into his bedroom. His parents turn it on for him and leave him alone. And off he goes on the internet. And he gets solicited by grown men all over the world. And by the time we get into it, he has sent his pictures all over the United States. They're on the internet forever, never go away. And then a 12-year-old boy chatting with other boys he thinks are his own age, experimenting with sex, and he's sending his stuff and soliciting stuff from other 12-year-old boys in his school and getting things from them and then sharing them with a grown adult male online. And all of these venues is where that is traded and solicited online. And I'm not going to go through all of these venues. I don't have time to talk about each and every one of them. But having been undercover in all of these venues, at some point or another, the majority of information, the majority of chat, the majority of things you'll find on them are sexually oriented material, not innocent chat. I'm thrilled with what the United States Congress is doing with TikTok right now. And I know everybody's crying and saying, oh, it's going to hurt my business. But TikTok has been a major distributor of child sex abuse material over the years. They didn't start out named TikTok. They started out named something else. And because they got a black eye for being named something else, they changed their name to TikTok to reduce the black eye that they had. And there is a direct correlation between child sex abuse material and human trafficking. This was a case just a couple of months ago that I saw on the internet when it came up in Texas. Some Asian and Guatemalan suspects were arrested, and at the time they were arrested, it was a group of 10 suspected illegal immigrants from Asia and Guatemala. They were in a house in Texas. Homeland Security tells Fox Digital News that the premises was being used as a stash house for human smuggling. When they were taken into custody and after a search of that stash house, they also were in possession of child sex abuse material, images that they were putting out on the internet. I work a lot for a group called, in fact, since the inception of Child Rescue Coalition, I've trained all over the world for Child Rescue Coalition. Child Rescue Coalition keeps a lot of statistics, but they track child sex abuse trading on a number of venues on the internet. And by tracking child sex abuse trading, we can track the IP addresses of the demand for child sex abuse material. We can track the actual suspects and where they are. Then we can go to their homes and search their homes, find the child sex abuse material, and in quite a few instances, we find that those that are looking at child sex abuse material are also sexually abusing kids. They're the ones producing it, they're looking at it, and we'll talk a little bit later about how that happens and why that happens, but they are the ones that are out there buying sex trafficking for kids. They're the ones that are actually doing it. So going after them going after the demand goes after the supply in child sex abuse material. And there's a lot of facts up here. I'm not going to read over these facts, but the most shared child abuse file, 2.5 million unique IP addresses have shared that. We tracked with this system one image being uploaded, and 24 hours later, based on the geolocations of IP addresses, we could see that image, based on its digital signature, we could see it in every country in the world. Within 24 hours, of a child sex abuse image being uploaded, it is in every country in the world. That's how prolific this is. And there's a lot of other stats up there. 90% of children who suffered sexual abuse were violated by somebody known in the family. It's not a stranger type thing. It's a global problem. Since 2004, there's been over 9 billion child sex abuse media transactions on the internet. 18,000 unique IP addresses are identified every hour trading child sex abuse material. 27,042 unique computers just in the last little while in the United States. 838 in the last 30 days in North Carolina alone. I'm sorry, my mouth gets dry. So we have a problem everywhere, not just in other countries. So some perspective on that data set. Offender traffic is currently only captured on a small portion of the internet. We capture at Child Rescue Coalition 5 out of 10 file sharing networks. And we see a small subset and a picture of that data. There's a lot of other venues out there, the Tor network, the Tor network, Freenet, and some of the others that are hidden networks. We can't track as much. Now there's some other projects that are doing that and tracking those, like Thorn. If you haven't heard of Thorn, you can go online and look up thorn.org. And thorn.org started by Austin Kutcher and is a very reliable source for information on what's happening on the dark side of the internet. Child sex abuse material plays a unique role in sex trafficking. It can be a form of trafficking, and it's a major factor in many kids' lives in seeing pictures of their children, of their colleagues in school. They develop an interest and develop a predilection for looking at that same age for the rest of their life early on. It often leads users to seek out what they viewed. Every person who sends a child sex abuse image is victimizing that child, is in essence participating in the rape of that child. They're saying it's okay to do this, and they send it on and traffic it on. It enables all of the images out there, enables and emboldens. It validates others when they see that information out there, and it helps with their shared fantasies. So there's a couple of studies that have been done, and I know some of these studies that have been done out there, some people say, they didn't do that study correct, or they didn't do this, and they try to debunk some of these studies. But a guy named Bork and Hernandez, two researchers, two practitioners helping those that were put in jail for just child sex abuse material, went through an exhaustive study for a number of years with the offenders in the Butner Institute near here in North Carolina. And in that study, they studied 2,500 plus individuals. And during that study, the offenders took polygraph tests. And if they failed the polygraph test, they were out of the study. At the end of the study in there, and the purpose of the study, a very small minority of those people that were in jail for just child sex abuse material, for just viewing it, a very small number of those admitted to having hands-on offenses with children. At the end of the study, they found 85% or more of those 2,500 people finally admitted to hands-on sex offense of children. And that's a significant study. Some researchers try to debunk it. Sometimes that's driven by the government trying to say, well, if we put all those people in jail for long periods of time, then it costs lots of money and we can't put them in jail. In fact, the U.S. Department of Corrections initially forbid the two researchers from even publishing their study until later on down the road. So there's information about that study out there. Michael Bork and Hernandez is the study, and it's called the Butner Redux Study. You can actually find it online. The badge for law enforcement is an all-access pass to everything you never wanted to see. I've seen so much that I have an experience PTSD all the time from what I've seen over the years. I'll tell you a little bit about a case study of mine. Andrew Lasatera, we arrested him. He was trading child sex abuse material on the internet through an FTP site. He had a lot of hardcore stuff. His stuff was babies and kids. And I even, last night, I took the language that I had out of there, some of the language describing what he had in his collection out of there. Extreme child sex abuse material of kids. When I downloaded those online, we did the search warrant to his house and went to his house and talked to him and interviewed him. I found close to, after the forensics, I found close to 100 files of a 15-year-old female with sexual acts, including masturbation, objects inserted into her genitals. And then I found files of that same 15-year-old girl nude, drunk, or passed out. There was a baby's leg and foot inserted into her genitals. The geodata in those photos, taken by a cell phone, led me back to a house in Vermont where the 15-year-old girl lived, across the road from where Stephen Lasatera lived, or Andrew Lasatera lived, before he moved to Cary, North Carolina. Interview the girl. She was as much a victim as the baby was. She was his girlfriend, but he was coercing her into doing photos and doing things that she didn't want to do. Do we charge a 15-year-old? I'm thankful for shield laws that come about for not charging kids for something that they're coerced into doing for things like that. So sex abuse images of children are a permanent record of that child. They're valuable commodities to the people looking for them. They take pride in their possessions. They keep them. One of the guys that I arrested had 1.5 million sex abuse images on his computer. In nearly all the interrogations and interviews of the suspects in well over 20 years in working just this type of case, the suspect admits to fantasy about the images that he sees. He admits to masturbation about the images that he sees, and most of them admit to starting that fantasy in their early teens and moving on into their early teens. Now, is it a possessor or just abuser? I've got some pictures of baseball cards up here. Anybody in here collect baseball cards? Oh, that's old school, right? When I was growing up, baseball cards were really popular. Now you can look at them online, but back when I was growing up, we didn't have it online. And everybody collected baseball cards. All my friends would trade them back and forth. So, do you know anybody that collected baseball cards? Yeah. If they were given a chance and given a ticket or able to purchase a ticket to a baseball game, do you think they would go to a baseball game? Absolutely. Same thing with collectors of child sex abuse material. If they're given a chance to do it safely without getting caught, they will take that opportunity. There's a victimization continuation cycle of children. Sexual victimization of children, sex abuse of children, sexual exploitation of children, and that we're going to talk about that. Now, I had 8 or 9 slides that went through this, and I pared them down to one slide. It would start through the different methods of this. But the first thing that happens is they do an illegal act, if carried out, would constitute an offense. They see that. They see a picture of a child being raped online. They fantasize about that. Then masturbation comes into play. Masturbation is the engine room for the distortion of their thinking. The constant fantasy and masturbation process chips away at their brain inhibiting them from doing what they would normally do. It chips away at that wall, and it's called cognitive distortions. This is taken from some research done by Catherine E. Canning, who was at the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime. This was back in 2001 when I got this slide from her. So after that chip away at the wall, they see validation. It helps chip away at the wall. Everybody else is doing it. It's on the internet, the environment that they see all the time. Pornography and CSAM are the masturbation fuel for the, and then victim availability comes around, and grooming, and then abuse. And if you interview suspects, they will tell you they have fantasized about it. One guy told me, he says, "I'm so glad you caught me. I was thinking about this girl and thinking about ways I could go and take her and do something to her and not get caught." So it happens all the time. That cognitive distortion is how they minimize, how they deny. It's just a mere desire on my part. It's not anything bad. They rationalize how children enjoy sex. And there's even people out there at NAMBLA. Anybody heard of NAMBLA before? NAMBLA had a saying, "Sex before 8 or it's too late." We got to teach kids how to have sex. Now that was a national organization that talked about boys in particular, but that was their motto, sex before 8 or it's too late. Over 99% of the reports received by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children on their cyber tip line are CSAM. Then we break that down into reports this year, or in 2022, that's the latest data I could find there, 32 million reports on CSAM online. And this slide deck is available also if you're taking extensive notes. So in North Carolina in 2022, in United States in 2022, NCMEC escalated more than 49,000 of those reports to urgent requests. They'd get marked as a Category 1. Those cyber tip line reports come to law enforcement as Category 1, Category 2, Category 3, and Category 4, which is just child sex abuse material. So in North Carolina, cyber tips, in 2003, when we first started tracking in North Carolina, I was the internet commander in North Carolina, we had 8 cyber tips. This year, let's see, 2024, this year, as of March, they've had 2,393. Last year, for the year, North Carolina had 26,771 cyber tips. That's a 142% increase from the year before. That was a 148% increase from the year before. That was a 137% increase from the year before. And it's done that every year for years. It's just exponentially growing. And how do we get rid of it? How do we change it? We take down the offenders. We go after the demand. Just like my colleague said earlier, we go after the demand. Sometimes we try to go after the websites, and we say, oh, let's take down the websites. And then what happens is, I worked a case in North Carolina about a website. When I first got it, it's like, when I got all the details about that website and all the users that were sharing child sex abuse material on that website, I had thousands of leads across the United States, across Canada, across the world. What do I, as a North Carolina cop, what can I do with all those? And so the feeling in law enforcement, I hear the frustration talked about earlier, the feeling in law enforcement is just dump them and get rid of them because all I can do is work on the guy that's in North Carolina, and we don't share that information. We should. We went through exhaustively, and I pulled a team in, we went through everything and sent leads out to every agency across the country to go after the demand that people were going after it. So unfortunately, when most people hear about cyber tips, they believe these reports are related to creepy pedophiles on the dark web, but it's not true. They're just the normal places on the web. Yeah, the dark web is big, but I tell you, there's a place called Freenet, which some of the most hardcore users are on, and most people don't even know what Freenet is. Most abusers would never even know how to get on the Freenet because it's so complicated to get on the Freenet that they wouldn't know how to get on them. So most of the demand is on these types of sites out there. The cyber tips are skyrocketing. This is the data Snapchat being the current winner on cyber tips out there. Amazing, right? So what can we do about it? I put some things up here. Legislation, we talked about legislation. CSAM scanning. Every image or every video has a digital signature called a hash value. We can enforce legislation that causes people like Apple, who refuse to do it, to scan every upload of every image for those digital signatures of child sex abuse material, and then there's already law in place that requires them to report anything to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So that's one thing. Stricter controls on porn sites requiring age verification. But again, that's going after the porn site. Legislation change on terminology. Alaska, it was child pornography. It's now CSAM. Greater funding for the watchdogs, for those groups that are out there. More support for local organizations and 501c3 groups that are actually doing some work out there. I heard that only one person gets funding from the federal government. That's appalling. We need to do better than that. We need to have hundreds of people doing research on this, because I'm the poor investigator. I don't have time to do research, and I rely on that research for where I focus my efforts. And so we need to do that. Speak out to the community. Who wants to hide and pretend it doesn't exist? The community doesn't want it to exist. Law enforcement agencies statewide say, oh, I'm going to put all these dollars into chasing misdemeanor marijuana buys, but I ain't going to put jack squat into child sex abuse material because people want me to chase marijuana misdemeanor buys, right? Don't glorify it. Become an agent of change. Now, we'll take questions at the end of our presentation. It's time for my partner to stand up and have his speak. Oh, you got it.
So we're switching out computers here. Can you all hear me? Yeah. Great. While we're doing that, I want to start by saying a couple of things as clarification. One, what I'm going to talk about is a young person's exposure to internet pornography. Several times in my career, it has been conflated with CSAM, child sexual abuse material. We are talking about 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old kids watching internet pornography. Is that clear? Great. Second thing I want to make clear is what an amazing day it was yesterday for me to hear so many people talk about internet pornography and its effect on demand reduction. This is something that I have been interested in talking about for a very long time. And if you were here to see Tony Porter's talk from A Call to Men yesterday, at the very top of his list was pornography. So I want to also make it very clear that if we don't address our young children's exposure to internet pornography, I am going to be standing here at the North Carolina Demand Reduction Task Force in 2030, in 2040, in 2050, in 2060. We have to get to our young people. And today, what I'm going to talk to you about is the fact that we are actually doing that. And it's working. This is supposed to be good news for you. We're addressing this. So the next thing I want to make clear is that our underage American children are the largest viewing demographic of internet pornography in the world. Our kids see more content than the entire country of France, or Germany, or Italy, or Spain, or India, or Japan, or Mexico, or Canada. Not Canadian children, but the whole country. They start watching at age 11. By age 15, they're seeing 7 videos a day, on average, 10,000 before they leave high school. This affects them culturally, socially, emotionally, physically, physiologically, and it comes at a time in their lives when their brains are the most susceptible to that influence. This is not a nuisance or an annoyance or frustrating or part of their growing up. This is a statewide mental health crisis for our children that we need to be addressing like an infectious disease. So my name is John Van Arnam. I'm the founder of The Third Talk. I am also the parent engagement coordinator for the North Carolina Center for Safer Schools. In a previous position, I was the strategic coordinator of school safety for the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and I am here today as the Pornography Prevention Committee Chair of the North Carolina Demand Reduction Task Force. Super proud of that, super proud to be working with this organization and the wonderful people that are here and have put on this event. In putting together this presentation for you, I went back and saw a couple of slides that I think is gonna help you have a better understanding of what our young people are actually up against. And before I do that, I wanted to say this one last thing. I've called this The Third Talk because our parents will have a conversation with their young people about the birds and the bees. And then somewhere around middle school, a guidance counselor or a health teacher will have a conversation with your young person about anatomy, pregnancy, sexually transmitted infections, and then that's it. And then our young children are left on their own to go discover their own sexuality. And unfortunately, they do that online. So I have called this The Third Talk because I think we all need to have another conversation with our children to let them know that internet pornography is not sex education, which is what it is for most kids today. The last thing that I want to tell you is that we're doing this thing, and I understand that people always come up to me and say, or they see me do a presentation like this, and they'll say, well, how's that even possible? This is a 6'2", 220+ pound, loud bull in a china shop type. How could you possibly get in front of middle schoolers and talk about a topic so sensitive? And I got to tell you, it works like a charm. I get all the kids involved right off the bat, and it's the parents that are sitting there slack-jawed in disbelief of what their kids are raising their hand talking about. It's wonderful. So, as I said, I'm going to get back to a slide that I created in 2016. In 2016, 23 billion visits to Pornhub. We can say that now. You couldn't say Pornhub in 2016, by the way, but you can say it now, and you can see that I've blocked it out here. Produced 92 billion videos were seen. The United States of America watches 40% of that. Our underage kids watch about a little over a third. I'll save you the math. It's 531 hardcore explicit videos viewed by our underage American children every second of every day. That was 2016. I'm going to be up here for 30 minutes. We were talking this morning, 955,000 explicit hardcore videos viewed by underage kids while I'm standing here. You think about all of our speakers, and then the 2 days that we've had this, and then you're going to go home and have a weekend, and that number keeps going. Here we are in 2019, 3 years later, the number of visits almost doubled. So you can imagine what the number of videos produced and viewed was. Here we are in 2020, an international marketing company did a study to find out what tech companies had the largest impact on our society, and Pornhub was number 3. Pornhub had a bigger influence than Amazon, TikTok, or Netflix. And I'm sure you can imagine it wasn't a positive impact. So, About 7 years ago, I switched up my focus. Now, I've been doing this about 22 years. And I always thought that I was battling a young person's exposure to internet pornography. About 7 years ago, I determined that what I was actually battling was an adult's fear of talking about porn to these young kids. That's what we are fighting now. Because I know for a fact that we could change this up if we just made it socially acceptable, even encouraged, to talk to your young people about internet pornography. We could do it like that. But at the moment, 75% of parents don't think their kids ever have or ever will see this content. So how does that work out? Well, the way that works out is that you're at a U12 soccer game. You've taken your little athlete there, and you might have caught them the night before watching internet pornography. And you feel troubled about this, you're not quite sure what to do, you feel scared, you might lean forward and tap the shoulder of the parent sitting in front of you and go, hey, does your little Timmy watch porn? Right? 75% of the time, that parent's gonna turn around and go, absolutely not. Which is gonna cause the parent that asked the question to say something like, yeah, no, Coach really seems to have them working together today. Great game, right? Conversation ends, communication stifled, the problem continues to go on and on and on and on silently. Every parent has this issue. Every parent. That's every parent sitting on the sideline, whether they know it or not. That's the dad that brought the Capri Suns and the mom that brought the oranges and the coach. Every parent has that problem. And not ironically, every parent on the other sideline that came to root against our team has that same problem. And that's every soccer field, in every county, in every state across the United States of America. And this may seem like a negative. To me, I see it as a positive. This is what we can do. If every parent has this issue, then every parent is the solution. And it's not hard for us to put that out there. We've done it before. Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Perfect example, right? We did that as a nation. So, I've been asked today to talk about the harms that our young children are experiencing from internet pornography. And let me start by saying that I wish that if kids would just turn green by watching internet pornography, I'm telling you the CDC would put helicopters in the air. This would be a red lights flashing, all hands on deck emergency. But instead of turning green, they turn inward. So we see dramatic increases in aggression, depression, loneliness, sexual assault on middle school campuses. We talk about virtual safety, but if we were truly going to get to the mouth of the river where the demand for human trafficking starts, it is our 10, 11, and 12-year-olds watching internet pornography. Now, some of the other things you see up here is bullying. We've seen a dramatic increase in bullying, not only in the number, but in the severity. Now, of course, to me, I think, well, if you, as a 10, 11, and 12-year-old, are viewing human beings as two-dimensional objects, and somebody starts to cry, it means nothing to take pictures of them, put it up on Instagram or YouTube, and continue to bully them. So they can't get away from it at home, and they feel worse and worse and worse about themselves, which can lead to suicidality. This is doubly tricky for young girls who may be confused or upset or unsure about how they look physically. And then if they're bullied about this, it can lead to suicidality, dread, depression, loneliness, brain trauma. I'm not talking about emotional, some squishy, wishy topic. We're talking about physically changing the brains of our young children. They're releasing all kinds of chemicals in that rewire their neural pathways, which makes them able to pass a lie detector test. If you showed them a happy couple, and what they were going to do when they got home. This is what our children genuinely believe is going on. Remedial learning. Now I get it, that I am a hammer and everything looks like a nail. But we have a remedial learning problem in the state of North Carolina. And to me, if we are allowing our children to pull blood away from their frontal cortex 4, 5, 7 times a day, where they actually retain the information that they're learning, it doesn't strike me as odd that we're having trouble educating young people. Human trafficking. Kevin did an amazing job talking about CSAM. And we know that traffickers show their victims pornography so that those victims know what to do when John comes to buy sex from them. We know that that act is going to be filmed and sold online. But in a much broader way, when our young people are watching internet pornography, imagine this 11-year-old boy who's watching slapping, spitting, choking, hair pulling, name calling. And it might be 3 or 4 years before he goes out on a date with an actual woman. So he might find out that that live person doesn't want to perform the way that he's been taught by watching pornography. He may actually find out that technically what he's talking about is assault. But what happens is that young boy goes, "Oh, the girls in my high school are lame. It'll be better when I get to college." And then he goes to college and he realizes that the young women in college don't want to behave that way either. And he's like, "No, I picked the wrong college." And then he thinks to himself, the only way for me to get what I feel like I deserve, what I feel like I'm entitled to, what I've been pushing into my brain for now 7 years before I got to college, is to buy it. And my admonition to everybody here is that we are grooming an entire generation of predator boys by not reaching them at 10, 11, and 12 and talking to them about internet pornography. For the girls, in 2016, the British Board of Film Classification did a study and determined that 56% of the girls who answered the survey said they were watching internet pornography to determine what their boyfriends wanted. Okay? So, they're watching video after video after video to try to learn what the boyfriend wants because they want to be the best girlfriend. Okay? But as they are also pumping this content into their brains, they are realizing that watching this video and having young boys ask them for pictures and videos and things like that is sort of normal. So our young girls getting these requests from boys, it doesn't seem odd when they get another request for a naked picture or a naked video. And we know that that is ground zero for human sex trafficking. So I will also that the other, in 2020, the British Board of Film Classification did a follow-up study and then determined that the vast majority of girls were now claiming to watch porn to protect themselves from PTSD, right? So they knew what was going to happen after they went out on that date, okay? But so they knew it was going to be an assault-type event. So what they were doing is they were watching these videos to prepare themselves for what was going to happen. And I always, whenever I'm speaking to just a group of men, I'm like, okay, gentlemen, what would you have to watch? What would have to be happening to you 6 hours from now that would going to cause you to watch a video? Would you be fighting Mike Tyson, wrestling a grizzly bear, fending off a mako shark? What horrific event would you need to protect yourself from emotionally by watching a video in advance? That's what our girls are doing by watching porn. So when we talk about human trafficking, this was really nice to see. Kevin and I have a very similar slide. When I became involved, the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force Commander, a gentleman by the name of Kevin Roughton, showed me these stats where we doubled from 2019 to 2020. And we came to the conclusion that this jump happened because kids were in virtual learning. Virtual learning put them in front of their computers more often. Being in front of their computers more often made them watch more internet pornography. By watching more internet pornography, they became easier to groom. And so the cyber tips to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children doubled. Doubled. So, that's not, this to me is the challenge, and I'm grateful to Bill Wolf, who was here yesterday, who talked about this, because what we are talking about here is the release of chemicals in the brain and the body that, when young kids are watching internet pornography, that mirror drug addiction. We're talking about adrenaline, testosterone, and dopamine that act like a stimulant in the body. These are very different chemicals than when you're holding hands with someone that you genuinely care about. But I was so grateful to him to bring this up, because sometimes people don't believe me when I say this, but our kids are releasing the same chemicals in their brain and their body as heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine. So they see this content. It's wildly compelling to them. Right? Every human being has hardwired into their DNA the interest in other human beings without their clothes on. Relationships, and even physical intimacy. But when you're watching internet pornography and you're a young child, you can add what mirrors drug addiction to that challenge. And that is why I feel we should not wag our finger in the face of our young children, and I don't do any blame or shame in that regard. We need to hold them like they've been in a car accident and empathize with them for growing up in a world that we created, grown-ups. They didn't go to Indeed, fill out a job application, go to the job, make money, buy their iPhone, and pay Verizon for it. We did that. And we are also the solution. This is not the saddest part to me. I'm keeping my eye on the time. This is the saddest part. Might be a little squishy, but it's love. We as adults have allowed our children to skip over a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to experience their own sexuality and fumble and bumble in a safe environment. That does not exist. When I was going to high school 100 years ago, it was something like, hey, how you doing? I'm John. Good at math, great at basketball. Not very good at science, working on the science. Do you want to study after school? Great. And that exploration took months and months and years and years. And I'm googly-eyed. My hands are always sweating. And I'm nervous about what I'm going to say and say the wrong thing, and I do all the time. And I got a note from a friend of mine who gave it, from a friend of hers, from her, that said, yeah, he's cute and funny. Cute and funny? I'm a Nimrod. I don't know what to say. I'm cute and funny. I'm walking around on clouds. Today, our girls get a text from an older boy that says, send me a waist up. Naked picture of a girl, waist up. If she says yes, decorum prohibits me from saying all the words, but she's loose, or whatever the term is, right? And if she says no, as you hope she does, she's then, you know, lame or a cold fish or a lame duck or whatever that term is. But either one of those is a pretty horrible way to start high school. So the third talk is not sex ed, and that's critical. We just bring awareness to this problem for parents and young people, okay? This is about as close as we ever get. But what I tell young people when we're in these auditoriums with their parents, I say, you know, have you ever like held a puppy and it's super great? Or you hug your grandma as she's leaving from Christmas vacation? Or you see somebody walk across the cafeteria that you think is great? Those are not butterflies in your stomach. That's oxytocin. That's vasopressin, and yes, dopamine, and serotonin, collectively called the cuddle hormones. This is what they write songs about. This is what they write poetry about. You know, when you just met that person and you're holding your face and you can't believe that that's who they are. Oh! That's gone for our kids. That is the saddest part for me. wonder we see increases in depression and loneliness. Oh, and it's on us, parents, make no mistake. So I'm not the only one that thinks this, right? The Department of Health and Human Services will tell you that sexual health is an intrinsic element of human health that is based on positive, equitable, and a respectful approach to sexuality that is free of coercion, fear, shame, discrimination. Internet pornography is fear, discrimination, and shame, okay? The CDC will tell you that the problem of sexual violence is too large and costly and has too many urgent consequences to wait for perfect answers and compelling need for prevention now. I'm scared out of my mind of the word prevention because of what the Governor's Crime Commission feels about that every time you put something in that has the word prevention in it. So I say awareness. But what we're talking about here is intimate partner violence, dating violence, sexual assault on middle school campuses, and heck yeah, it's too compelling to wait for perfect answers. What we're doing at the Third Talk is we're going into middle schools and saying, nah, this isn't for you, and this is why. And we're happy to share that. We're working with a couple of human trafficking groups here that are very interested in adding this type of demand reduction into their own programs. The World Health Organization says one of the most effective ways to improve sexual health in the long term is a commitment to ensuring that adolescents and young people are sufficiently educated to make healthy decisions about their sexual lives. The Third Talk is not sex ed, but helping them make healthy decisions in their life to avoid internet pornography is easy. So I'm going to show you a video here because, as the young people say, pictures are it didn't happen, right? That is here. I'm here to show you not just that I'm talking about it with you, but we're actually doing it. I've been doing this for 22 years. I've been doing it in North Carolina for 12. And when I say that, I mean statewide PTA events, schools, churches, the Department of Public Instruction's back-to-school safety conferences for the last 8 years. And I am very proud to say we've never had a complaint. Okay, and my boss, the director of the North Carolina Center for Safer Schools, Karen Fairley, pulled me aside and she said, John, you know, we've never received a complaint. I was like, cool. And she goes, no. We talk about guns, drugs, gangs, critical incident, reunification, active shooter, bullying, suicidality, human sex trafficking. People complain about our programs all the time. No one has ever said that's inappropriate. I don't like the way he delivered that content. Not a teacher, not a superintendent, not a vice principal, not a parent, and not the kids. And I would love to say, that's because I'm so good, clearly. But the truth of the matter is that when I'm sitting in a room of parents and their kids and I watch the faces on these young people who hear some grizzled old guy saying all these words, it's like water coming out of a fire hydrant. I watch the shame and the fear and the guilt come just flooding off of them. It is by far the most rewarding part of my work. They want us to talk about this. So, if this works.
Internet appropriately.
The COVID-19 pandemic has changed the landscape for learning this school year, and many kids are spending more time online. That's one reason the founder of the Third Talk says parents need to be aware of what their kids are viewing online.
75% of parents in the United States don't believe that their kids ever have or ever will see this content. And to me, this might be the biggest problem we have.
I knew my guy friends were watching it by the time they were like 11, 12. My parents, they didn't talk to my brother because they didn't think they needed to, but they did. His friends show him porn at lunch.
And it is how they connect with each other, it is how they do everything. And in that phone is all the good of the internet and all the not so good. There isn't a filter available that can keep your child from the, hey, have you seen this? And I want you to know that what I learned when I was your age remains true to this day. If you have something in front of you, an adversary, a difficulty, a challenge, and you want to push it back and push it away from you worse than it wants to push you, and you believe that you can do it no matter what it is. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
I think every parent there needed that because, you know, talking about that sort of stuff is not easy. So you definitely help pave a way for conversations to happen between parents and their children.
He's the founder of what is called the Third Talk. The concept here is that there's something else we all need to sit down and warn our kids about.
I got my first iPod Touch when I was 8.5 years old. My parents thought that they were doing everything right. And looking back, I think I severely regret that purchase because at the age of 9, I became fully addicted to pornography.
I know that we're supposed to protect our kids, but we do them a huge disservice when we don't have that conversation and when we don't ask them about who their friends are, what they're doing at sleepovers. We have to put ourselves out there and be comfortable being uncomfortable when it comes to the safety and security of our children. I just want to commend you and the Third Talk. I think your program is well deserved and it's something that should be featured in every high school and middle school across America.
John Van Arnam has a degree in psychology and founded the Third Talk to create awareness and give parents tips on how to start the conversation.
The training was amazing, life-changing to say the least. I get home, had to talk with my kids, and it was amazing how they opened up just by me asking the questions. And it was just immediate, the outpouring response. It's like they were waiting for someone to ask them that question. It was amazing. It was beautiful, actually.
As students are heading back to school, both in person and virtually, a North Carolina organization called the Third Talk is teaming up with the North Carolina SBI and Department of Public Instruction to create a series of videos regarding a tough topic.
Flat out, just having the ability to realize you need to have a conversation. We're not addressing an issue that probably has been silent for many, many years. And so that part of the conversation and that discussion, I think, was absolutely phenomenal.
My name is Karen Farrelly, and I am the Executive Director of the North Carolina Center for Safer Schools. We at the Department of Public Instruction fully appreciate and support the joint effort of the Third Talk and the North Carolina Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force.
This is not a, I have a bad kid or I am a bad parent. This is all of us. What do we do about that? It feels like it's an impossible task. It feels like something that there's no way that we could possibly do. And I want you to know that nothing could be further from the truth. Not only is it possible, but it's happening. It's happening. We are having these conversations very, very successfully. Look at that, it worked. Thank you all for listening to that. Thank you. Yeah, I will totally take your applause on that because I gotta tell you, with love, all of that is happening and has happened without an ounce of funding. I'm proud of that. You get me to talk about that and there's a little in my voice, okay? We're gonna move past what we've already tried and just get to this very last slide. Our kids are trafficked at 14. They are sexting each other at age 13. They're watching internet pornography at 11. When I first did this, a junior representative in North Carolina took me to their church to speak to other representatives. It was 7 years ago when she became a junior representative. The 11-year-olds that we were trying to protect back then are now 18. So we can stand here today. In another 7 years, those 11-year-olds are going to be 18 and have seen 10,000 videos before they leave high school. My name is John Van Arnam. I'm the founder of the Third Talk, and Kevin and I are here to take your questions now on any of this. And thank you all very much.
All right, we've got one back here.
So the school systems here are really hard to get into. Like, I tried all the school systems and the kids I see during the day to have therapy with them at their school, and they won't allow us to talk about it because they don't want them to have that stuff before they learn. And so we've tried, my partner and I have tried to get into the schools and talk about human trafficking 101 and pornography and safe sex. And the school's like, we don't want that. That's not a part of our curriculum. Our counselor does that. So it is important, but how do we get there? Because we keep getting shut down over and over and over and over again, and our services are free as well.
So my services aren't free. Just want to put it out there. I tried that for years and years and years, and I just liked eating better. So this is how it always goes for me getting into a school. I'll call them up, and I'll say, hey, I'm John Van Arnam, I'm the founder of the Third Talk, and I want to talk to your parents and your middle schoolers about internet pornography. And they'll say, let me get this, thank you so much for the call, sir, I greatly appreciate it. I just want to double check with you. You're a 6'2", 200-pound, loud, adult, grown, bald man, and you want to come talk to our middle schooler. You know what? We're going to put you in touch with Amy. She's the counselor. It's going to be great. She's going to get right back to you. It's going to be fantastic. Thanks for calling. Click. 6 months later, I'll get in that school. And then they'll make a video and say, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought. We're in the budget this year. We were in the budget last year. So if there's any legislators in here or anybody has any influence on the legislators, just have them raise their hand. And we'll get into all 2,800 schools in the state of North Carolina. It's the only way I know how to do it. Brute, phone call, just cold calls and call back and, because you'll see one child. It's usually the guy sitting in the back, the young kid sitting in the back, doesn't say anything. We're going to get to him. He's going to understand, ooh, this is not only bad for me physically, emotionally, and all that, but it's going to ruin my adulthood. We can get to these kids.
I found that it depends on the administrator at the school you talk to, too. Some schools, for North Carolina, the Internet Crimes Against Children, we would try to teach Internet safety and get into schools to teach Internet safety for children. And most of the schools were receptive to that. But there was one school I remember standing up, and the moment I said the word sex, the principal came up and said, okay, you're done, shut it down, leave. Literally. And so it's like, this is a middle school. They all know what the word sex is, but I don't know.
No, it's fear.
I feel your pain.
It's fear. That's all it is. It's the fear of adults having this conversation. I'm sorry to say it, but we'd rather let our children walk straight into a chopper blade than just warn them about it. People ask me why I'm passionate about this. It's that. It drives me absolutely up a wall.
Got a question in the back there first. Oh, you got one over there.
So thank you both so much for that. Kevin, I've been looking at the stats that you shared for a while about all these cyber tips coming into North Carolina, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of them. Can you tell us how large is the staff that is investigating those tips and how they decide which ones actually get investigated?
Oh, that's really a good question. The staff of the State Bureau of Investigation, Internet Crimes Against Children group in the State Bureau of Investigation is 15 agents. They do the intake for all those cyber tips. They do all of the pre-vetting on all of those cyber tips by doing the court orders to find out who they are. And then those cyber tips go out to partner agencies. The State Bureau of Investigation partners with most cities and most states that have large enough populations to feel like they need to do it. A lot of smaller agencies don't partner with them. But then the cyber tips go out to those agencies and they go. And for example, in Cary, I know Cary has diminished their unit down to one person since I left Cary because they wanted the personnel for somewhere else. It's deplorable, but they wanted the personnel for somewhere else, and now they have one person working those cyber tips, and he's about 4 months behind. And to make that even worse, that's the same all over the state with manpower put into this. There needs to be some type of legislation that many agencies will say, you'll send them a cyber tip, and they'll say, oh, we don't work those cases. The SBI works those cases. That's not true. It's like abdicating, for a law enforcement agency to say that, is abdicating their law enforcement responsibility, which needs to be pushed further from a legislation standpoint to force them. If you called them and said, hey, somebody's breaking into my house, would they say, we don't work those kind of cases, call somebody else? No. But when it's a child being raped online in a video, we don't work those cases, send it somewhere else. It's appalling what happens. But there are many agencies that are doing things on it. But it is very far behind. Thank you. To make that worse, while she's getting prepared in Seattle, they did that. They pushed the case back and pushed the case back till it reached a year. During that entire year, there was a little girl being sexually molested in that home. Seattle lost $9 million in a lawsuit. Rightfully so. But at any rate, there was the next question.
Just thinking about the graph where, like, you know, the United States is basically off the edge of the page in terms of porn consumption. Do you have thoughts about how other countries are handling the pornography problem, and like how they are able to be successful in a way that we aren't?
Yeah, they're educating in schools.
And I've taught everywhere from Australia, Morocco, South America. I taught all over the world. And law enforcement are approaching it everywhere. It's not just, actually, Brazil has a better model for doing it than the United States does. Brazil puts resources into it every day, daily. Some of the South American places I've taught in, they just put great effort into it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no mysteries. We don't talk about it in the United States. We've got a tremendous problem. People in other countries talk about it. They have less of a problem. There's no mysteries to this. It's just, again, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but it is the fear of our adults to have this conversation with our kids that continue to perpetuate this problem.
So, I'm over here. So I'm a detective at a local agency. I work a predominant amount of statutory rape cases and then sexual abuse, a lot of time of juvenile victims, and I'd say even the last year, we've seen a sharp increase in those incidents, and then in conjunction with those victims, we're starting to see an increase in the self-generated CSAM. So for me as a local detective, obviously holding the people responsible that I can criminally, another issue and void that I'm seeing is these parents and these kids. So from an investigator's standpoint, when you're speaking with these parents, they have no idea what to do or where to go from there. And even sometimes we're seeing the juvenile victims do not see what they've done as wrong in any way. So what advice do you have to me as a local detective of how to stress the importance of this? Because I have, and it doesn't seem that my message is really getting through. And then what can I tell the parents? Because that message may not be best for me.
I'm a firm believer, just like John is. When I teach internet safety for parents, and when I talk to parents, I tell them that all these programs that you can put on your computer to block this and to do this are absolutely useless. The one thing that works is having talks with your children, having those parent conversations about what's going on. Then when I'm talking to parents of victims, those parents of victims tend to immediately treat their child as a perpetrator because, oh my gosh, they shouldn't be doing this, and let's ground them from this and this and this. And so you have to have a conversation with the parents of the victims to help get them out of that mindset, because they are being victimized by grooming and everything else that's going on online, and by the world's standards, and by the parents never having talked to them to start with.
Yeah, I will second that. I believe strongly that filters and blockers make parents feel good, and that's it. And I sometimes joke around and say, so what are you going to do? Text your child the password to the new blocker you put up while they're in their room and you're in the living room? March up there. Sit them down. Hey, I bought that phone. I pay Verizon every month. Let me see for a minute. There's
the school system.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I think there's a phrase that we seem to be missing sometimes in our parenting strategy, which is, because I'm your dad and I said so. You can't see my phone, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I can just call Verizon and shut it off. All right, okay. We have to take an active role. We can't filter our way out of this. The gentleman that you saw, he's a law enforcement officer in the blue shirt, right? He said it was if they were waiting for someone to ask them that question. I can't tell you how many parents tell me, I started having that conversation, said exactly what you said to say, and my kids said back to me exactly what you told me they were going to. They're waiting to talk about this. I've never sat with a child in a state PTA event or in a living room, dining room, kitchen, back porch who sits there with their hands folded staring down at the floor waiting for it to be over, ever. Without fail, they want to talk about it. And maybe because I'm not their parents, it's easier, I don't know. But what we found is that if you broach this topic, you then find yourself having conversations with your young people about boyfriends, girlfriends, breakups, what's acceptable in a relationship, what you're okay with, what you're not okay with, and put your own values onto those children. And unfortunately, talking about pornography ends up being sometimes the first conversation about any of this that they have.
Tell you how useless filters are. The school systems all employ filters that keep kids from going to certain websites. Talk to any kid out there. They'll tell you how they use VPNs. Those filters are useless. I would say useless is something on a boar hog, but trying to be really nice in here. But they're useless, and we talked to the school officials. We had a big event in Wake County where I talked to the school officials and say, well, you can filter out the encrypted tunnels and stop those encrypted tunnels on VPNs from going through your system, and that'll stop it. Oh, no, we don't have the resources to do that. So we'll just make parents feel good like we're doing something. And I'm sorry if there's school officials in here. You're not the IT administrators. It's the IT administrators that are the problem in that.
I think you have to take a look at this from a practical standpoint. Our young kids are very interested in the naked human body. Mm-hmm. So they'll take this school computer, it goes home, it's no longer part of the Wi-Fi or access that they have at school. They can then download things, bring it back into school, and it's there on their computer. It just, you know, we've tried to stay what I feel is like arm's length away from what is truly necessary, which is like, you know, hey, buddy, you know, we don't want anybody seeing your bathing suit area, and you shouldn't see anybody else's bathing suit area either, and if you ever do, please come tell mom and dad. We seem to be so afraid to have those conversations with our young people that we just don't. And I understand why, you know, I understand that it's scary, but, you know, I don't know if Kevin has heard this too, but I've heard people say, well, if I bring up pornography to my young child, I'm going to make them interested in it, and they're going to go look at pornography. So, you know, and I'll say, yeah, okay, that's true. My daughter's going to college next year. If you think I'm going to, or I have, let her discover fraternity houses and alcohol on her own without my discussion in advance, you're crazy. Is that going to make her want to go to a fraternity party? I don't know, maybe, but if she does, she's going to be smart about it. We'd never send our youth group or our middle school or our kids out in the Mojave Desert to look at the flora and fauna, take pictures and do, you know, paintings, and just forget to warn them about rattlesnakes, tarantulas, heat stroke, and dehydration. We'd never do that. We would tell them in advance. We have to do the same thing. The internet is a wild place. Lots of good, lots of bad. We have to tell them about all of it.
Have you been able to get into the schools for like parent night or like back to school night where you're reaching the parents?
So our program is specifically designed for parents and students together. That is that's the sweet spot. Because with love, if you're just talking to parents, they all nod their head and say, this is a great idea, right? And then they're backing out of the parking lot at the school, and they're like, I'm not talking to my kids about that when I get home. Right, so the short answer is yes. It takes a long time. It's very difficult. Videos like this are helping because they see other administrators and principals and things like that go, okay, it really wasn't that bad. That's our most favorite. Parents and kids together, right? Because then you don't have to worry about starting the conversation. It's just a thing, right? Remember that guy we saw at your high school or your middle school 3 weeks ago? Yeah, what do you think? I don't know, stupid. Okay. Did he say anything good? No. But what you realize is that you're now having a conversation with your young person about internet pornography. It's already happened, right? When we talk to just kids, of course, you know, they'll do the same thing. They're a little louder than the parents. They get it. But they're not running home to say, Mom, Dad, can you come into the living room? We need to have a talk about internet pornography. You know, it doesn't work like that. So parents and kids together, we usually do that after school. It's usually a non-school event, right? They're gonna rent me the gym for $1 so I can give my awareness conversation. And then, you know, there's a magic and a beauty. It is wonderful. It is wonderful.
I'll tell you what doesn't work in those training sessions is scare tactics. Stay away from presentations where you talk about scare tactics with parents and children. Talk more about the real issues that are out there and what's going on instead of the scare tactics, because scare tactics don't work. We've seen that for years and years. The Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force gets into schools all the time and gives presentations. And I agree with John. It's best when the parents and the students are there together and you can have a frank conversation with them. They've also done it in church groups everywhere else that you can imagine. So.
Yeah. The other thing I say to parents all the time is, you know, you want to have a conversation with your child about this. Well, there's two things that happen in a conversation, right? Somebody's talking and somebody's listening. The parent's role, take a wild guess, is to listen. You cannot authentically be dictatorial to your young person and tell them what it's like to grow up with 100 million pornography videos in their back pocket as they're going through puberty and adolescence. You can't. So don't try, because they're going to read it on you. What works is, really? No way. You don't say, huh, are you serious? Get out of here. No way. And that child just goes, yeah. Have you ever seen porn on a school bus? No. Oh, okay. Well, Timmy's older brother Tommy showed Jimmy and Johnny a video and I heard it. Huh, you don't say. Yeah, it was weird. And then the next thing you know, I'm telling you in my experience, it comes down to, yeah, cousin Jimmy showed it to us when we were in the treehouse at the sleepover when I was 9 years old. I can't sleep. I watch it every night. I sleep, right? This is when a parent should not go, what? That's shame. What do the neighbors think? Give me your computer. I'm taking your phone. I can't tell you how many kids I've talked to that said, yeah, I've put up with my internet pornography addiction for years because I didn't want mom and dad to take my phone away. This is too critical to the health of your kids. It is the mouth of the river for human sex trafficking. We're grooming a generation of predator boys and a generation of girls who are willing to send videos and pictures to people because that's what they're watching all the time and that's what everybody else is doing. Don't do that.
This is not a question, this is just a comment. First of all, I just want to thank you, gentlemen, for such awesome, amazing presentation. It's valuable. When you spoke about parents, and something came to my mind about not giving up the responsibility of being a parent. So I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina, and my daughter went to school at Emory University down in Atlanta, Georgia. And I recall at one time I was home and I was not able to speak to her as I usually do, either by text or by phone call. And I was really worried, as a mother should be. And believe it or not, what I did was I called the campus police at Emory University down in Atlanta, Georgia. I said, this is a mother up in Charlotte, North Carolina. I cannot find my daughter. I haven't spoken to her. Will you, this is where she's supposed to be. Will you find her? And believe it or not, they found her and she called me and she let me know that her phone, the battery or something was wrong. The point that I want to make is, even though your children are grown, and you said you have a daughter going, my daughter's now a graduate of Emory, the point is that you can never give up on your children. It's your responsibility as a parent to be in touch because they do need you no matter how grown they are. And I'm not embarrassed to say, that's my daughter, I love her, but she better call me, okay?
Thank you. And turning your children over to tech parents is abdicating your parenthood.
Ditto.
Tech is not their parent. Filters are not their parent.
Where does technology stand? Where does technology stand now with pixelating images for law enforcement so they're not bombarded with these horrific images and avoid the PTSD and things?
So we have a product called Griffi that's initially funded by the Department or the National Institute of Justice, through grants. And that product called Griffi actually will, based on hash values of known child sex abuse material and hash values of digital signature, it will go through a computer and it will identify all the known child sex abuse material. Then the investigator can then minimize into little tiny icons. The pixelating, you can't tell whether it's a crime or not by pixelating and looking for it. So you get victimized over and over for doing that, but you don't have to look at 1.5 million images in a case. You only have to look at 300,000 or 400,000. I don't know. But you brought up another thing too. There's a huge problem, and North Carolina needs to address it. I hope there's some legislators still in there. But the huge problem is AI, artificial intelligence, is now on us for creating child sex abuse material. I can take your daughter's picture and create all kinds of child sex abuse images with her face through artificial intelligence. And that needs to be addressed in legislation because it's not. Because it didn't exist. Hope that answered your question, but yeah, this is tough.
So I have a couple questions. It's like 3, and should I just ask them one at a time or just ask them all at once and then hopefully you guys remember it? Okay, cool. So do you think that the recent spotlight on mental health makes it difficult for parents that are from generations before, when technology wasn't here and didn't exist, to understand things like the lack of serotonin and dopamine is how, it makes it so addictive for children that have mental health? And how would you approach a parent that is of an older generation and explain to them the importance of this?
So the way that I explain that to parents of a different generation is with empathy to start, okay? Their parents did not have this conversation with them. They didn't have to, so there's no model, right? But when I talk about that, I said, okay, remember you stole your dad's Playboy magazines or somebody's Playboy magazines, right? And I said, okay, so you can look at that magazine and you have a pretty good idea what you're gonna see based on the cover. And then you're turning that magazine's pages and slowly this person is getting less and less clothed. Your brain is able to, in advance, preemptively understand what they're about to see. When a 11-year-old boy, or girl, but 11-year-old boy in this case, goes online to their computer and just, what do girls look like? Pow! What comes up is this unbelievably, wildly inappropriate video that that child was not prepared for. Dopamine floods in the brain. Okay, adrenaline floods in the brain, testosterone floods in the brain, and the next thing you know, they're like guilted, shamed, fearful, and can't really seem to stop watching this content. And it is like they're taking drugs. I'll say, if your kids, so by the time kids are 15, they're watching about 7 videos a day on average, right? And I said, okay, if your child was taking like 7 hits of heroin a day every day, you wouldn't wait around to do something about this. This would be a family emergency. And so that's I try to equate it to magazines and pornography that they're familiar with, and with drug abuse, because we've done a much better job with that here in the States.
Thank you. Also, so for schools that are like Title I schools that don't really have the access to things like this, obviously probably more in need than other schools, do you guys have any free videos online or QR codes where teachers could access this information?
Yes. So we have a curriculum that is available to schools. We also have videos online that will help parents have these discussions. We are, fingers crossed, in the short session budget this year, and if that happens, we get to every school in the entire state. So the short answer to your question is yes.
Okay. Are you going to share that later, or?
www.thethirdtalk.org.
Oh, okay. Okay. Are the curriculums free?
You have to sign up for the curriculum, but if it's so we don't just give that to parents.
Gotcha.
But we certainly will to schools, and there's just a sign up form, and it goes to, information at the Third Talk, and we pick it up, and, we vet the schools. We don't just randomly hit send on every request that comes in for our curriculum. We're doing that in North Carolina. We're in discussions, very initial discussions with other states at the moment, but we focus in North Carolina.
Okay, last question. I'm so sorry. How do you deprogram children and teenagers?
I'm going to tell you, you can't deprogram children. I'm not a psychologist, but you can't deprogram children. All you can do is love them in spite of what they're going through, and help them by putting your arm around them and accept them for what they are and how they're acting. But I've seen parents would come in, and 12-year-old girl in Cary was sending pictures of a hairbrush up her genitals to a guy in Australia. And we put the guy in Australia in jail, and then the parents sent this girl off to a boot camp. No. Doesn't work. They have to decide on their own to want to be deprogrammed before any counseling or anything else will help. It has to be their decision. You can't force it on them.
When I talk to groups of men, I will say, raise your hand if you don't do it. I say, raise your hand if you remember the first time you saw something you would consider to be pornographic. And without fail, every single hand goes up, right? And I'll say, okay, how about the 4th time? Or the 8th time? Or the 12th time? Nobody can remember. So I say, okay, our young kids are going to see these videos, and it's going to be with them for the rest of their life. As far as the deprogramming, I mean, I agree with Kevin. For young kids to stop watching porn is the way to do that, because you're going to then lower what is the interest level. A young boy or a young girl might watch online a video of 2 people having sex, and then what they want is more extreme content. Now it's 4 people having sex, then it's 7 people having sex, then it's 9 people jumping off Niagara Falls trying to have sex with each other, and it just becomes this ever-increasing interest. And so you need to arrest that. You do, as Kevin said, you need to love them. We need to have empathy. This is not their fault. This is not their fault. You need to tell them that you're sorry, you don't understand, you're here for them, you're going to listen to everything that they say without shame, blame, or judgment. Because if we're honest, the reason we have this problem is very little to do with our young people and very much to do with all the grown-ups.
One last thing before we close. I think we're ready to close. I said you can't deprogram them. They can work on deprogramming when they decide to. And you can love them and help them work on that, but they can get over it. They can change.
Thank you, John and Kevin. Come on, y'all put your hands together for them.